Welcome back to the Bloomberg Google Hangout at the U.S. Africa Business Forum. I'm Jonathan Allen. I'm joined now on set by Susan Mashibe of VIA Aviation and by Bobby Pittman of Kupanda Capital. And on remote for our Google Hangout, we've got Anthony Nwachukwu, who is the CEO of Southwest Global. We're going to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship in Africa, particularly youth and young entrepreneurship. I want to get a sense from you guys, and Susan, I'll start with you. It seems to me that there's a wide open space. If you want to start a business in Africa, in a lot of places in Africa, there's a lot of opportunity there. What do you think distinguishes those who are successful right now from those who aren't? And what are the challenges that face young entrepreneurs?
Okay, so basically, as you mentioned, there's an opportunity in Africa now if you need to set up a business. So basically, you need to first do your homework that separate the successful entrepreneurs and the ones which are not so successful yet. Because if you do it right in Africa, you'll be very successful. Yeah.
We spoke earlier today to Aliko Dangote, and he's a good example of somebody who's been very successful in what he's doing. And Mr. Nwachukwu, what do you think are some of the bigger challenges to getting a company started, set up, and stable in your company's in Nigeria? So in Nigeria.
Two of them, particularly an educated workforce and a proper regulatory environment or legal environment. Those are the major challenges. It's not easy in Africa to find educated young people once you do start the business. There are a lot of people in Africa with great ideas. They start companies, but getting the people to work in those companies present a challenge. Also, of course, the environment in which the company operates is also a major challenge because you don't have structures, laws that you can rely on. Contracts, you sign a contract, you don't know whether you can protect it in a law in a court. So those are the issues I think that are the major challenges for our businesses in Africa, from my perspective.
And Bobby, in particular, because you used to work as the Africa director at the National Security Council, I'm curious about risk in Africa. And obviously, this is something on a country-by-country basis. Some places are very peaceful and stable and have good governance, and others less so. But we've seen a lot of tumult and turmoil, certainly the Arab Spring in North Africa, and we see what's going on in Nigeria with Boko Haram, various other places around the continent. What are the risks to starting a business in Africa, and particularly? Well, let me just go with that. How much is the risk today versus a few years ago, and what do you think it looks like a few years down the road?
Well, I think as my colleague just mentioned, I mean, risk is the regulatory environment's changing, so I think it's much easier to start a business. I think when you look at someone like Aliko Dangote or even Susan Mashibe, who's with us, I mean, the key trait that all these people have is persistence. And I think that kind of goes above whatever risks are in the market, right? And that's true whether you're in Africa or whether you're in Florida, where I'm from. I mean, you always are going to have, especially as a new business and a small business, you're going to have government hurdles, local government hurdles, lots of changing regulation. You're a small fish, you can't, afford big lobbyists and other types of things. And I think, the common trait with all these successful entrepreneurs is really persistence, and not really listening to a lot of the naysayers and people telling them they can't do it, and the sit back and wait mentality, which I think we see pervasive across the world, inclusive of Africa, where people are kind of waiting for something to happen for their business to happen. And then people like Susan, who just chart out their course and make their success, and then it's easier for folks like me to come in and invest and provide support to the next level.
And what are you looking at in terms of investments? I'm curious. Which sectors do you say, that's the great sector, or that's the great country, that's the place I want to get into next, or which are the ones that are easiest to sell to other investors in terms of raising capital?
Yeah, I think, look, the big markets are always great. I always tell people my top 10 markets in Africa, Nigeria is my first 3. That's a lot of activity, a great market. Tanzania is a market that has it's been more challenging for some of the large projects, but then you have entrepreneurs like Susan who've been really successful there. So I think, you have to have a mix. I mean, I think there's some markets that are easier to sell, the Kenyas of the world, the South Africas of the world, but for entrepreneurs and small business, at least for our team, we really look at the entrepreneur and the person's track record to deliver, and certainly also the business. But I think ultimately entrepreneurs are successful because of the people and the people that drive that success.
Have you invested in Susan's business?
No, we have not, but we've worked with Susan quite a bit over the last couple of years.
So you can have a bilat. I'll leave the room in a minute. Susan, talk to me a little bit about your business, aviation services. It's an interesting idea. How big is it now? Tell the viewers what you do and how big it is now and where you see opportunities for growth.
Okay, so my company, VIA Aviation, specializes in providing logistic support for private jets in Africa. The opportunity is there because now private jets are a necessity in Africa because the airline network is not covering, the coverage of airline is not enough to cover the rest of the continent. So sometimes you have to fly to Europe to come back to Africa. So if you are like Mr. Dangote, to give a good example, he has a corporate jet. He has businesses in different countries of Africa. And so he cannot afford to go to Europe, to go back from Nigeria to go to Europe in order to come back to Tanzania. So he uses corporate jet, and also like foreign, like the oil companies, like Chevron and all of those. Also for them to get to these remote locations, which are not served by airlines, they need to use their company aircraft to reach to those locations. So for us, we saw the need because the infrastructure, the services, we are not there to support private aircraft operation. It was mostly geared toward the scheduled airlines. So we saw an opportunity and we went in, and our customer, it was really a good thing also for our customers too. They were very happy at places where we went in because we're also struggling to get by.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Anthony, curious what you think is the best thing that can come out of this U.S.-Africa investment summit going on here in Washington. Obviously, today's the business discussion with the Commerce Department and Bloomberg Philanthropies. What do you think is the best thing that could come out of this for Africa and for the United States?
I think it's the continuous dialogue. In a lot of ways, Africa to North America, because I work out of the U.S. and also out of Africa, there's still that mystery for U.S. businesses for Africa when they look at Africa. So I think these kind of forums are very, very helpful in terms of just opening that dialogue, having the two sides keep talking. Because, Africa is... the opportunities in Africa, I believe, are the greatest anywhere today, on any continent today, because it's still, to a certain extent, a virgin area. I work in the technology industry, and I know that technology in Nigeria is huge and a very unfilled space. So I think these kind of events, the dialogue together, is what's greatest about it, opening minds to Africa.
Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. Bobby Pittman, appreciate it. Susan Mashibe, appreciate you joining us. We will be back a little bit later, live from the Mandarin Oriental Hotel for the U.S.-Africa Business Forum in this Bloomberg Google Hangout. I'm John Allen. See you later.
Thank you.
We're joined by Linus Gitahi of the Nation Media Group in Kenya. I'm John Allen at this Bloomberg Google Hangout at the U.S. Africa Business Forum here in the Mandarin Hotel in Washington, D.C. Linus, I want to talk to you a little bit about what the media look like, in particular in Kenya and across Africa. Give me a sense of the extent to which you have laws that protect the press, or places where it's harder for reporters to really get in and report on their government, report on business?
Yeah, I think media has come a long way in East Africa. And if I may talk about Kenya in particular, media, and by media we're talking about print, we're talking about television, we're talking about radio and digital, which is basically what Nation Media Group is about, has evolved quite a bit in the last 10, 15 years. Today, in terms of media freedom, I would say Kenya is probably one of the best markets in Africa. You know, it's as free can be. That doesn't mean there are no attempts to limit that freedom. You know, I guess the media and politicians who are bedfellows are yet to be born. So what we do is to ensure that we safeguard that freedom, and we realize that the best way of safeguarding that freedom is also to be responsible. So I think we're in an era where we are thinking about responsibility as much as we are thinking about safeguarding the freedom.
And you're going to be partnering with the Bloomberg Media Initiative in Africa. What do you think is the end goal in terms of what can be brought to bear to help media in Africa hold leaders accountable?
Yeah, we have several engagements with the Bloomberg Initiative, and what excites me is their commitment to help to raise the bar in terms of financial journalism, because not all media houses are able to do that on their own, and they have this initiative where they are going to really push the whole reporting about the finance, about companies, about corporates, about economy, about policies related to economy, quite hard, and that's very exciting because really that's the future of Africa. The future of Africa is endowed with lots of resources. Africa has a lot of potential, and to have journalists who are able to articulate the issues and to analyze the various financial things, whether it's corporates or policies or governments, is a great thing, and that is where Bloomberg wants to put the money. So I think it's a great initiative.
How do most Kenyans get their news?
The media that has the highest penetration in East Africa is radio. I think it has a penetration of about 95%. It's followed by television, which will be about 50%, and then print, which will be about 40%. So between those three, you reach 100% of Kenyans. And of course, digital is also growing very, very fast. So the whole area of breaking news on the mobile phone is something that has caught on extremely fast.
Yeah. Here too.
Yeah, that's right.
As we're all walking around with our little alerts.
Right, that's right. We're getting all these alerts from even this meeting. Yeah.
How do you see the media growing along with the economic growth in Africa? I mean, obviously there are countries, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, that have robust economies. Now we're seeing a lot of growth in some of the other countries as well. How do you see the media evolving with that growth, with the business growth, with the economic growth? Do you have concerns about the ability of the media to keep up in terms of keeping transparency standards, keeping leaders accountable, making sure that those dollars that are being spent there are being spent the right way?
Yeah, I don't have any concern about individual media houses growing fast. I don't have a concern about individual media houses keeping up with the government and keeping them on their toes. I think where the gap is that there are still small media enterprises country by country. But Africa is integrating. Africa is coming together. And I think there will be need for media to also figure out how to integrate and how to have depth, so that you can report sitting in Nairobi, you can report about Nigeria, you can report about South Africa, and accurately so. That's an area we're investing in. As I talk to you today, we have about 32 journalists scattered around Africa. With that in mind, making sure that we tell the African story ourselves, so to make sure that what we're reporting out there is something that we're doing ourselves. How many companies can do that in Africa? Not many. Probably outside Kenya and South Africa, not many. So that's probably a gap, and that is why, again, the initiative like Bloomberg comes to help a great deal.
Can I ask you, when President Obama was elected, what was the coverage like in Kenya?
Oh, it was ecstatic. I mean, everybody was. We even had a holiday. It was. I think every Kenyan, regardless of where you are, tried to follow that, and it was probably one of the biggest news.
Do you think he's fulfilled expectations in Kenya?
Well, I'm not sure. I would say that. I like this initiative, but obviously, don't forget we are still waiting for him to visit. He's not visited. He didn't visit in his first term. He's come to Tanzania and promised that he'll come next door before the end of his presidency. I think he's got 2 years to go, so I'm hoping that he's going to pay a visit. But beyond the visit, I think initiatives like AGOA are there, they're good, but I think they started before his time. Mm-hmm. So I think it's fair to say we are waiting for a really solid initiative, not about Kenya, but about Africa as well, that can come from Obama and probably underpin his legacy as a president who came from that part of the world.
So this is a step, but he hasn't gotten to the place he needs to be.
I think this is a great step. It's an excellent step, particularly bringing business and business together, and even having politicians almost sitting and listening to business. I've never seen anything like this, where it is business on the podium, and our presidents are actually sitting there and watching, and the only opportunity they have is really asking questions. I mean, it's excellent. So I think it's a very good start, but I look forward to many more of those, and I look forward to personal initiatives, one or two big initiatives from him before the end of the presidency.
Linus Katahi of Nation Media Group, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us at the Bloomberg Google Hangout. We'll be back at the U.S. Africa Business Forum a little bit later, and thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Cheers.